Hi, and welcome to the channel. My name is Brian, and in this episode of This Fantastic Life, I take you to Gettysburg National Military Park in the small town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, located in south central Pennsylvania. On July 1 through 3, 1863, over 165,000 troops clashed in two massive armies here, leading to over 51,000 casualties, and about 7,100 people died. From the top of Little Roundtop here, you can see the entire battlefield. It stretches out before you. In today's episode, I'm going to give you a brief little history of the battle and take you on a walking and driving tour of the battlefield. I recommend that you begin your tour of the battlefield here at the Visitor Center, which is run by an outside organization. For $20.75, you can watch a film called The New Birth of Freedom, narrated by Morgan Freeman, browse through the fantastic museum, and then get a tour of the cyclorama, which I'm actually going to recommend that you do after you tour the battlefield.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure.
Stop at the National Park Service desk in the Visitor Center and get yourself a map with the auto tour stops numbered on it. One of the best ways to tour the battlefield, if this is your first visit, is to take the auto tour. You can follow along on the website on the National Park Service, or you can go to the Gettysburg Heritage Center website and you can purchase an app which you can download onto your phone and will automatically play at all the different stops a narration of the battle. Because much of the battlefield appears today the way that it did back in 1863, another great way to tour the battlefield is by walking across it. This way you can put yourself in the actual footsteps of the soldiers. On our most recent visit to Gettysburg, we walked the better part of the battlefield. It took us about 3 hours, and we covered about 6.6 miles. Following a successful battle at Chancellorsville in May of 1863, General Robert E. Lee led his army of 72,000 through the Shenandoah Valley on an invasion of the North, aiming for Harrisburg and Philadelphia and living off the crops of the land, hoping to sue for peace. On July 1st, 1863, the two great armies collided accidentally at the crossroads town of Gettysburg. The battle began when the 26th North Carolina Regiment under Pettigrew's division attacked the Union forces at Hurr's Hill, McPherson's Ridge, and Oak Ridge. These high grounds were defended by John Buford, who engaged delaying tactics until Reynolds' division could arrive. Reynolds was shot dead on the site, and Abner Doubleday took over. Eventually, the fighting ended with the Union pulling back and forming a fishhook position south of town on Culp's Hill and Cemetery Ridge. The original fighting was commemorated here 75 years after the battle, as over 1,800 vets from both sides came and dedicated the Eternal Light Peace Memorial. On the second day of the battle, the two armies found themselves aligned parallel to each other in a fishhook, where the Union Army was situated along the Cemetery Ridge, anchored at Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill to the north, and stretched out along the Taneytown Road. The Confederate line was on Seminary Ridge along Pitzer's Run. Unbeknownst to General Meade, who had just become commander of the Union Army 3 days prior to the battle, Sickles' division had advanced forward along the Emmitsburg Road and formed a long salient, which was too long to be defended. Lee's plan was to have Longstreet attack the Union left flank while Ewell attacked the Union right flank. On the afternoon of July the 2nd, Longstreet's attack under the Hood's Division began at the Sherfee Farm, a 50-acre farm owned by Reverend Joseph Sherfee, a pacifist Church of the Brethren member, and included attacks at the peach orchard and the Wheatfield. The house still to this day has bullet holes in the brickwork. The original barn was burned down, but was used during the war as a Confederate hospital. It has since been rebuilt. The fighting was perhaps the fiercest at the 19-acre Wheatfield, which was owned by George Rose. Around 4:30, George Brigade under George Anderson clashed with the Regis de Trobriand's Union Regiment here until the 17th Maine ran out of ammunition and retreated. Then they turned around and had a bayonet charge, countering the Georgian advance. Kershaw's South Carolina Brigade attacked, but was then fought back by the famous Irish Brigade. The battlefield changed hands 6 times during the afternoon and left about 4,000 people dead. Another area of the battlefield was the peach orchard, which was an exposed angle of Daniel Sickles' 3rd Corps on a small ridge between Pitzer's Woods and Cemetery Ridge. Union cannons were able to rake the Confederate line, left flank of Kershaw's line, as he advanced on the Wheatfield here. Peach orchard was replanted in 2008. Another important area of the battlefield here is Devil's Den, where there are a large number of giant boulders. The name Devil's Den predated the Civil War. Devil's Den lies directly beneath Little Roundtop and was used by artillery and sharpshooters. It was here that Smith's Union Battery was able to counter McLaws's assault on the Wheatfield. The battle for Little Roundtop began around 4 p.m. on July the 2nd. Little Roundtop held the key to the entire battlefield on the left side of the Union flank. It was not currently occupied only by a single corps. When Governor Warren, the chief engineer, arrived at the scene and saw the glint of the bayonets from the Alabama and Texans that were about to charge up the hill, he called for reinforcements, and Colonel Strong Vincent's brigade came up to defend the hilltop, just in the nick of time. It is said that they were about 5 minutes and 5 feet away from disaster here. Vincent was killed by a bullet through the head. However, reinforcements from the 140th New York and the 20th Maine, led by Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, helped to fight off the 15th Alabamans with a famous bayonet charge as they ran out of ammunition. Little Roundtop was key to the battle because it held high ground that from here, had the Confederates been able to bring up artillery, they would have been able to rake the entire backside of the Union line along Cemetery Bridge. This statue here is dedicated to Patrick O'Rourke of the 140th New York. O'Rourke grabbed the regimental flag and turned to urge his men forward when a bullet ripped through his neck. While Longstreet was attacking the Union left flank, Ewell was supposed to attack the Union right flank, or at least to demonstrate there to distract Meade from sending all of his forces to help reinforce Longstreet's attack. Ewell sent in a division of Virginians under Jones, and Culp's Hill was heavily defended by the New Yorkers under George Greene, 62-year-old general who was the oldest on the battlefield. And having experience in battle, he had decided to dig in breastworks, and his 1,400 men were able to hold off 4,700 Confederates throughout the afternoon. Today there is an observation tower on Culp's Hill which you can climb to get great vantage point of the battlefield. On July 3rd, fighting resumed on Culp's Hill. However, the bent angle of the fishhook allowed troops to concentrate where they were needed in order to counter the attack. The main thrust, however, was going to be against the Union center today. Following a thunderous cannonade between 1 and 3 p.m. from both sides, primarily from the Confederates, General Pickett's led the charge of 12,500 rebels. They were raked by artillery in the center and from artillery on Cemetery Hill, as well as Little Round Top. Losses were over 50%. Several Confederates reached the angle or the high water mark, which is represented here by the copse of trees. Overall in the battle, there were 51,000 casualties on both sides, making it the most costly war on U.S. soil. 23,000 of these were Union soldiers, of which 3,155 were dead, and 28,000 were Confederates, of which 4,708 died. Pickett's charge represented the climax of the Battle of Gettysburg. The failure of the charge crushed the Confederate Army's hopes of winning a decisive victory in the North. Thus, the Battle of Gettysburg is referred to as a turning point, ending Lee's attempt to invade the North after his success at Chancellorsville in May 1863. A heavy rain fell on the battlefield on July the 4th, while both sides decided to bury their dead. And during the evening, Lee retreated, escaping to fight another day. The Pennsylvania Monument on Hancock Avenue is the largest monument on the Gettysburg Battlefield. The tip of the sword on the statue of the Winged Victory is 110 feet high. A spiral staircase takes visitors to the roof of the monument. There are 8 statues which were added to the monument in 1913, including one for Abraham Lincoln. The monument to Major General George Gordon Meade stands on Cemetery Ridge along Hancock Avenue. Meade was ordered to take command of the Army of the Potomac just 3 days before the Battle of Gettysburg, after General Joseph Hooker abruptly resigned. Before that, Meade had been in command of the Army's 5th Corps. The monument features General Meade seated on his horse, Old Body. He's looking out over the field where Pickett's charge was turned back, in what was considered the high water mark of the Confederacy. The largest Confederate monument on the battlefield is the Virginia Monument. This monument stands 41 feet high, with a statue of Lee and his horse Traveler standing 14 feet high. The Bryan Farm on the Gettysburg Battlefield, just south of town in Ziegler's Grove, sits on both sides of Hancock Avenue. The farmhouse is on the east and the barn is on the west. It was home to Abraham Bryan, who was an African-American widower with 5 children. The Lydia Leicester Farm became General Meade's headquarters at Gettysburg. It is located on Taneytown Road. The Leicester Farm belonged to Lydia Leicester and her 2 girls, who still lived here at the farm when the battle grew near. A visit to Gettysburg would not be complete without going to the National Cemetery, where 6,000 soldiers and veterans have been buried, 3,500 of them from the Battle of Gettysburg. It was here on November 19, 1863, where Lincoln gave his famous speech. Following Everett's 2-hour speech, Everett being the former president of Harvard, a former U.S. Senator, and former U.S. Secretary of State, Lincoln spoke for only 2 minutes. His 275 words honored the fallen, defined the war as a fight for liberty, equality, and self-government, recalled the Declaration of Independence, and recommitted itself to democracy and a new birth of freedom following the war. It also warned that government of the people could fail if it wasn't fought for. The Soldiers' National Monument in the center of the cemetery is the focal point. Another unique feature of the Gettysburg National Military Park is the cyclorama. Cycloramas were paintings that were popular in the 1800s that gave you a 3D experience, with trees, grass, figures, fences, etc. often in the foreground. The cyclorama was painted by the French artist Paul Philippidot in 1887. Actually, there were several copies of it made. The first one opened in Chicago in 1883. It was so popular that a second one opened in Boston in 1884. It is this one that was bought, repaired, and opened in Gettysburg in 1913 for the 50th anniversary of the battle. In 1962, the National Park Service purchased the cyclorama and built a cyclorama center. A $13 million restoration in 2003 relocated this to the new museum and was opened in 2008 with lights and sound. This is a great way to conclude your experience at the Gettysburg Battlefield. Such a peaceful day here at the end of October in south central Pennsylvania, and it's really hard to believe that so many people suffered and died here fighting for a cause to save their union and to free the slaves. And I hope you enjoyed this special episode of This Fantastic Life. If you did, please give us a like and take some time to click that van icon in the lower right hand corner and give us a subscribe. That will really help us out in creating more content for the channel. And if I was historically inaccurate or if you have any comments, please write them in the comments below. Thank you. Until next time, happy travels.